And greetings. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show here live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast. I'm Steve Deace alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. We are brought to you by our friends over at Select Quote. All right. You know what? If you are looking for the right life insurance for less, like, maybe instead of learning to ride a skateboard, you wish you were learning to write code. Instead of scraping through college, you wish you had Bitcoin at less than a cent or secured a few of those NVIDIA shares before they boomed, right? This might be the FOMO generation, but that doesn't have to apply to your family's future when you're finding life insurance at selectquote.com, all right? There's a reason why so many have gone to Select Quote. And did you know that life insurance is even cheaper than you think? And with AI coming for our jobs, geopolitical changes that are killing historical alliances, the market bouncing around like a yo-yo, it's no wonder a lot of people are hunkering down, looking for ways to protect your future. Well, one way you may have forgotten about doing that is through the right life insurance policy. That's why you want to be looking for life insurance policies today with Select Quote. Life insurance never cheaper than it is right now. Get the right life insurance for you for less and save more than 50%. At selectquote.com/Steve. Save more than 50% on term life insurance at selectquote.com/Steve to get started today. That's selectquote.com/Steve. All right, coming up on today's show, we're going to have plenty of coverage of the Operation Epic Fury. Next hour, we are going to play Fake News or Not with some of the big picture analysis of what's going on and why that I have posted on social media for the first few days of this war. And then we'll sit around as a show and we'll debate whether my analysis is fake news or not. We are going to take a quick break for Pop Culture Tuesday because Netflix has an outstanding documentary out on the 1980 U.S. Olympic team, The Miracle on Ice. And it's very apropos, I think, for the moment that we are in as a culture right now. So I'm going to discuss that coming up in the final segment of the program. At the bottom of the hour, our old friend Jordan Schachtel will return. Some of you guys that are veterans of the Blaze, you'll recall that we have originally brought Jordan in as one of our national security analysts. So, of course, it's a good time to reconnect with him. He's out on his own now, but it's a good time to reconnect with our friend, given what is currently transpiring with a war that looks like it is going to greatly reshuffle the deck in the Middle East moving forward. All right, so we'll get to that and more first with Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Extraordinary Events. Let's go back to Friday during President Trump's trip to Corpus Christi, Texas.
Thank you, everybody. I'm going to take this and I'll be thinking about you, okay? Take care of everybody.
We would later learn it was not long before Trump ordered food for a throng of people at that Whataburger location. He gave orders aboard Air Force One to commence what we'd later learn would be dubbed Operation Epic Fury.
At 3:38 p.m., on Friday, February 27th, the United States Central Command, through the Secretary of War, received the final go order from President Trump. The president directed, and I quote, "Operation Epic Fury is approved. No aborts. Good luck," close quote.
That's Chair of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Dan Caine, who provided a beat-by-beat rundown of the early actions of Operation Epic Fury, the U.S. Israeli joint actions overnight Friday into Saturday, Washington time.
At H hour, the beginning of major combat operations, 01:15 local Eastern Daylight Time, 9:45 local AM Tehran time. As dawn crept up across the Central Command AOR, the skies surged to life. More than 100 aircraft launched from land, sea, fighters, tankers, airborne early warning, electronic attack, bombers from the states, and unmanned platforms, forming a single synchronized wave. This was a daylight strike based on a trigger event conducted by the Israeli Defense Forces, enabled by the U.S. intelligence community.
For 47 years, the Iranian regime has chanted death to America and waged an unending campaign of bloodshed and mass murder, targeting the United States, our troops, and the innocent people in many, many countries.
The very first Israeli strike targeted Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei's palace in Tehran, where he and other top officials were gathered. Israel struck based on CIA intelligence. We would later learn that the initial strike took out more than 40 of Iran's top regime officials, including Ayatollah Khamenei. In less than 48 hours, coalition forces had attained air superiority over Iran and had dropped more bombs than each day of the 12-day war combined. On Monday morning, Secretary of War Pete Hegseth said,
"Turns out the regime who chanted death to America and death to Israel was gifted death from America."
Hegseth also provided more insight on what the mission is with Iran.
This is not Iraq. This is not endless. I was there for both. Our generation knows better, and so does this president. He called the last 20 years of nation-building wars dumb, and he's right. This is the opposite. This operation is a clear, devastating, decisive mission. Destroy the missile threat, destroy the Navy, no nukes. Israel has clear missions as well, for which we are grateful.
Iran, of course, retaliated early and often after the initial strikes, combining missiles, rockets, and drones, and targeted over a dozen territories or countries, including most of its Arab neighbors. Many were civilian targets, including one in Oman. Iran's foreign minister provided some accidental insight about Iran's command and control capabilities, or lack thereof, fairly early into the campaign.
Well, there might be a risk. I have been in touch with all of them, as I said, especially with Qatar and Oman foreign ministers. I explained for them what happened in Oman was not our choice. We have already told our, armed forces to be careful about the targets that they choose. As a matter of fact, our, military units are now, in fact, independent and somehow isolated, and they are acting based on instructions, general instructions given to them in advance.
Extraordinarily, each of those Gulf Coast neighbors have stood in solidarity against Iran and with coalition forces, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia. On Sunday, Hezbollah threw their hat into the fracas, prompting Lebanon's government to condemn the Iranian-backed organization and declare opposition to those forces. Tragically, one Iranian counterattack resulted in the deaths of 6 U.S. service members. Central Command confirmed that. It's believed to be the result of a drone attack on a base in Kuwait. Also in Kuwait, thanks to what's being described as a friendly fire incident, 3 U.S. F-15 fighter jets were downed, but all 6 pilots were able to eject safely, including this brave woman who was recovered by a friendly Kuwaiti local.
You're fine? Really? You need something to help you? No problem, you're safe. You're safe, you're safe. Everything good? No problem. Thank you for helping us. Everything perfect?
On Monday afternoon, Secretary of State Marco Rubio once again reiterated the mission.
Our mission and our focus is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and their ability to manufacture them, as well as the threat posed by their Navy to global shipping. That's their objective. That said, we would not mind, we would not be heartbroken, and we hope that the Iranian people can overthrow this government and establish a new future for that country. We would love for that to be possible. But the objective of this mission is the destruction of their ballistic missile capabilities and of their naval capabilities.
Rubio was also asked why now, and he answered in comments that have since been seized upon by some of the usual characters to prove that the Jews dragged us into another war.
There's 2 reasons why now. The first is it was abundantly clear that if Iran came under attack by anyone, the United States or Israel or anyone, they were going to respond and respond against the United States. The orders had been delegated down to the field commanders. It was automatic, and in fact, it bared to be true because, in fact, within an hour of the initial attack on the leadership compound, the missile forces in the south and in the north, for that matter, had already been activated to launch. In fact, those had already been pre-positioned. The third is the assessment that was made that if we stood and waited for that attack to come first before we hit them, we would suffer much higher casualties. And so the president made the very wise decision. We knew that there was going to be an Israeli action. We knew that that would precipitate an attack against American forces. And we knew that if we didn't preemptively go after them before they launched those attacks, we would suffer higher casualties and perhaps even higher those killed. And then we would all be here answering questions about why we knew that and didn't act.
As a reminder, it was U.S. intelligence that led Israel to strike initially, so it was President Trump who de facto gave Israel the go-ahead. Last night, Trump Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff, who had engaged in negotiations with Iran over its nuclear program in recent days, dropped this nugget, which provides a little more insight as to why those talks broke down.
Both the Iranian negotiators said to us directly, with no shame, that they controlled 460 kilograms of 60%, and they're aware that that could make 11 nuclear bombs, and that was the beginning of their negotiating stance. So they were proud of it. They were proud that they had evaded all sorts of oversight protocols to get to a place where they could deliver 11 nuclear bombs.
We're also learning this morning that Israeli strikes targeted and struck an Iranian Supreme Council gathering on Tuesday as the group was meeting to choose a successor to the late Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. That report is from Fox News, citing a senior Israeli official. It's unclear how many of those senior clerics, the Assembly of Experts as it's called, were actually physically in the building. This montage, of course, is just scratching the surface of what the world has seen over the past 96-plus hours. And finally, this.
What's the message to Iran?
Don't. What is your message to Iran in this moment?
Don't.
I'm going to bomb the shit out of them. It's true. I don't care. I don't care.
And that's what happened while we were away.
If you enjoyed the coverage that Aaron provided there, the clarity that he was trying to provide from the veritable fog of war that has already set in on multiple fronts. And that's just what we try to do with all of our content here at The Blaze. We try to be the counter to the spirit of the age and provide clarity where there is confusion elsewhere. And that's why you want to join us and subscribe so you don't miss any of our content that we produce for you each and every day. Take advantage of that at blazetv.com/Deace. Use the code Deace for $20 off an annual subscription today at blazetv.com/Deace using the code Deace. Quick little addendum to Aaron, your montage. The president was just asked moments ago, quote, "Did Israel force your hand against Iran?" The president responded, and I quote, "No. If anything, I might have forced their hand. We were having negotiations with these lunatics in Iran, and it was my opinion that they were going to attack first. If anything, I might have forced Israel's hand," end quote. So that statement from the President of the United States from the White House, literally just moments ago. So next hour, we're going to get more into what I think of all of this. All right. But I want to, as best we can, help us all, regardless of what we think about it, to think as clearly as we can. Because just going back to what I said a moment ago, there is a lot of confusion right now. For example, you may have heard, or maybe you think, well, we're doing this for dispensationalism. It would actually go against the narrative, the eschatological narrative of dispensationalism, to topple the regime in Iran and replace it with one friendlier to Israel in the West, because the instigating moment to much of dispensationalist understanding of eschatology, one of the instigating moments is what's called the War of Gog and Magog. That's a reference to a prophecy given by the great major prophet Ezekiel around 500-something BC when he was captive in Babylon. And Gog and Magog are traditionally interpreted to mean Russia and Iran. So if you actually toppled the Iranian regime and replaced it with something friendlier to Israel, that would actually go against the very narrative that some people think is driving our foreign policy. Secondly, Pete Hegseth, well, look at Hegseth. He probably had he's a Christian, and he made them all think. First of all, a lot of the Christians who thought about prophecies like that got purged because of the COVID vaccine, because they were the ones that didn't stand up to the COVID vaccine. Secondly, Pete Hegseth is a Presbyterian. He's a Reformed theology guy. There's a reason why Douglas Wilson and it came and spoke at his bequest at the Pentagon last week. You want to make Douglas Wilson belly laugh? Go ask him what he thinks of a Left Behind book. Pete is from a Protestant tradition that actually thinks the Left Behind stuff is cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. Tucker Carlson on his podcast yesterday said the Mossad was igniting bombs inside of Qatar. The Qatari government came out today and said that's not true, and none of that is true. I have no idea where that came from. So maybe we can debunk the whole Qatar is paid by Qatar narrative. All right. A lot of people's narratives are being challenged right now. And this deck is going to be majorly reshuffled when this is over, and especially depending on how it's over. So as best as we can on our show, we are the Worldview Show. I'm going to do as much as I can to try to help us think through the various worldviews that we are consuming that are telling us what to think about all of this, at least as much as I tell you what I think about all of this. There is a legit reason for people on our side, like a Matt Walsh, for example, to be concerned about this. If you're a millennial like Aaron or younger, you weren't alive for the Iranian hostage crisis. Yesterday, the White House, I think, did the smartest thing with their messaging they've done yet. And they put out a timeline of 42 terrorist attacks conducted by or sponsored by Iran since the Iranian hostage crisis in 1979. And the reason they did this was to push back that this was some kind of preemptive attack. But because the White House narrative is this is a response to the fact Iran's been at war with the United States for, 4 decades. But many of the dates and events that are within that timeline, if you're a millennial or especially a Gen Zer, and Matt's a millennial, you either don't remember those things or you were not alive for those things. Furthermore, no one ran on, guys, we're going to have a, war with Iran. No one ran on that. Now, on the other side, though, if your commentary is being picked up by enemies and being used to further the propaganda of regimes that hate us, you might want to consider whether you have crossed over from, and I'm not talking about Matt here, I'd be more talking about Tucker, frankly. You know what, remind me, I'm going to have to name names more often so that people don't think I'm criticizing people that I'm not, okay? I think Matt is asking some very legitimate questions, and I think you saw Caroline Leavitt, the White House spokeswoman, respond to Matt yesterday on X in a very thoughtful way in response. That's the very kind of discourse that we ought to be having on our side about these kinds of things on a regular basis. Matt was respectful in his dissent and pointed. Caroline Leavitt was respectful in her counter dissent and pointed. To me, that's a productive argument. When you have people like Tucker, on the other hand, and their commentaries are being used by our enemies, that's maybe where we're going beyond legitimate dissent. Is this really America first? And in our overtime today, we're going to show you what ended up being the most voted in poll I've ever had. And even we're going to discuss the ebbs and flows of this poll as folks on both sides of this tried to capture this poll and invade it to get it to say the result that they wanted. All right? Is Operation Epic Fury America first? I think Matt brings up some legitimate questions to question why, particularly if you're his age or younger. I thought Caroline Leavitt was very eloquent in her response. I think Tucker has largely crossed over into a narrative that he believes Israel is the seat of evil in the world. Or at least this particular Israeli government led by Bibi Netanyahu anyway. And therefore, all of his analysis goes through that filter to the point now that he's even being fact-checked by, looks down, checks notes, Qatar. Okay? The reality is, we don't have a proof of concept that we can do this without getting bogged down into a quagmire. We don't. And so I think it would be to the benefit of all of us if we gave all of us a lot of grace, if we didn't try to gaslight one another. Let me rephrase that. It would benefit us all if we stopped behaving the way that we have since about a month after Charlie's memorial. If we just literally stopped behaving as we have for like the last 5 months.
That would work on a number of fronts.
And most certainly here. I also think, even though I have I think still very legitimate questions about what comes next. The president was asked today what could go wrong, and he said, hey, it is possible. In the same press gaggle, he said it is possible. It's possible. Something worse than the previous regime could emerge in Iran. That could go wrong. That is possible. President Trump said that just a few minutes ago. I think that now the president has also said he's got a good idea of what's going to come next. I think the president has earned an immense amount of credibility in the foreign policy arena. Last summer, I said there are two things that cannot happen. Iran cannot get a nuclear weapon. We cannot get bogged down in a regime war in Iran, right? I said that the whole time leading up to the bombing in June, right? And then I said, now I don't know how to navigate those things simultaneously. I don't, and that's not my job. So that's why the Bible tells us to pray for our leaders, because they're the ones that are supposed to figure these kinds of things out. Well, Trump managed to figure that out last year, did he not?
Mm-hmm.
Pretty much, this guy has had the Midas touch when it comes to foreign policy, has he not?
It's a good record.
It's a pretty good record. So I'm inclined now to say, listen, J.D. Vance wants to be president. His entire brand is I'm even more America first than Trump. A lot of people's future political capitals are riding on this being the right decision and being prosecuted the right way. So I kind of think the wisest course of action is, until they prove otherwise, we should let them demonstrate why we have put so much credibility into them in the first place. Not to mention, every time a member of the Iranian high command dies, this world becomes a better place. Can I get an amen on that?
Yeah, that's a good over-under.
Yes. So, I'm Team America, and I can't control the decision of whether to go into war. All the questions I had this time last week when we discussed this about, well, what comes next if we do this, are still on the table. But am I empowered to be the one to get the answers to those questions?
No.
No. Was I empowered to get some of the answers to those questions to things like COVID? Were there places I could go to get answers to our questions?
Yes.
Yes. And so therefore it was my responsibility to do so, right?
Yes.
In this case, I don't have the ability to get those answers. And largely, I think people who tell you that they do have a particular narrative that they want to come true. And so right now, the best thing we could all do is pray for precision and success by our military in the swiftest way absolutely possible that sets the stage for a better Iran and therefore a safer world, and a safer world for America and America's interests when this is over as soon as possible. And to not look for opportunities to get out in front of this, because I'm trying to position myself for what the world post-Trump looks like, where I think I am uniquely empowered because of my knowledge base or size of my platform, that I'm going to be able to grab control here and steer what MAGA means. First of all, Trump is correct. MAGA is not an ideology, it's a brand, and it's his. MAGA is Trump. That's his brand. Now, America First is different, and there are debates about what that means, to what extent it shall go, and it will certainly outlive Trump's a time in office, and those are debates we need to have. And you saw Matt Walsh and Caroline Leavitt having one of those debates yesterday, and I thought that was exactly how a free republic and a healthy movement is supposed to look when there's disagreement. I was totally fine with what everybody said on both sides. But this is not the moment, looking at people like you, Steve Bannon or Tucker, this is not the moment to think, hey, this is how I'm going to use this to realpolitik, position myself to be some future power broker. We have soldiers in harm's way. I certainly think if we're having more concern about toppling the Iranian regime amongst sectors of the American right than they're having in Riyadh, in Dubai, in Cairo, maybe we're off step. Thoughts? And maybe it's because our concern really isn't America's policy, but my ability to frame and shape it moving forward and my own position wherein. America first doesn't mean your ambitions first. It does not mean your narratives first. It means America first. And right now our soldiers have been engaged. So Godspeed, success, and God bless the United States of America. Gentlemen, your thoughts.
one thing, Tucker, definitely, because he's spoken it out loud, and I know is there on some level with Matt Walsh and then with others online, is a frustration with this seeming certainty and aggressiveness and sense of purpose as it applies to what they think might be a foreign escapade, and how we behave over here domestically vis-a-vis what's going on in Minnesota, transgenderism. I think that's understandably frustrating at times, but it's very, very important for everybody not to let them cloud what may be obvious truths. Khomeini is unambiguously evil. And based on the intelligence we clearly have on the ground there in any number of ways, the level of certainty about how that evil may be ready to lash out in mass terrorism, the likes of which we've never seen, and we've seen some terrorism. It's as frustrated as you are, and you have a right to be at home, even Tucker, about how the right goes about winning, that you cannot let that become your kryptonite against doing what is right when evil flexes abroad.
So the message that we're hearing from the administration, and again, we'll kind of get into your analysis later on, Steve, but the message that we're hearing from the administration, this is the mission. It is to degrade their military capabilities and their ability to project force outside the borders of Iran. That's pretty simply put. And we've heard Hegseth say that. We've heard Trump say that. We've heard Rubio say that. All the same thing. Now, is that a good enough justification for doing these strikes? Well, that's up to you. You're free to agree. You're free to disagree.
Mm-hmm.
Here's where I come down on this. We saw Iran get decapitated. We heard their foreign minister, I believe it was still on Saturday, say, yeah, sorry, Oman, all of these military forces are kind of acting independently, and it wasn't our choice to attack Oman. Their response was to attack like 8 to 10 of their neighbors. They sent a drone to a UK interest in Cyprus. They hit a French interest close by as well. I'm just saying, if the pretext to destroying and degrading Iran's capabilities was that they must not be able to attain an intercontinental ballistic missile that had a nuclear warhead on it, I don't know. I think that's kind of self-justifying from what we've seen in the aftermath of an attack. Instead of attacking America in Israel, they just attacked everybody.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of think that maybe it's justified. If their reaction to being attacked is to attack everyone, you really don't think that if they got their hands on a nuclear warhead with the capability of hitting continental United States, they wouldn't use that if they could or wanted to? So if you put a gun to my head, I am at a place where President Trump, I disagree that there's not a proof of concept. Yes, there is. We saw it in Venezuela. Now, whether or not it'll go down the same way it has so far with Venezuela, that's another matter. I'm not saying that this is just all hunky-dory and we're all tiptoeing between the raindrops here. No, it's a frickin' war, guys. But if you put a gun to my head, I think what we're doing here, I think we've already seen evidence for the justification of what we're attempting to do.
Since you invoked Venezuela, what country was the number one oil customer of both Iran and Venezuela?
China.
China was. And I don't think that's a coincidence.
It's between 15 to 18% of China's oil imports came from those two countries. Well, 15 to 18%, guys, China is humongous.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't think those things are coincidence. I think there's multiple layers to this on multiple angles. And I think this is a show of force to China as well. Are you really sure you want to grab Taiwan and seek hegemony in the world? Are you really sure you want to step to us? You want to mess with us? I think that there are many different things happening here simultaneously. More in a moment.
The Steve Deace Show.
Hey, if you want the best night's sleep of your life without drugging yourself and have it cost you just about $1 a night, our friends at Beam, they've got just what you're looking for. It's called the Dream Powder. I discovered this when they came on board with the show last year, and I found out it is still possible for Steve Deace Post 50 to sleep an entire night through and not have to get up to pee at least once. Beam made it happen. It's a powerful blend of all natural ingredients, reishi, magnesium, melatonin, and more. It tastes amazing, like the old hot cocoa you got from Nana back in the day, but not loaded up with all the carbs and sugars. So if you've been waiting for the right time to talk about or to try Dream after hearing me talk about it for the last year or so, they're offering you guys right now an exclusive discount. Just go to shopbeam.com/Steve, BEAM as in Mary, beam as in laser beam. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve. You'll get up to 40% off Beam's Dream Powder, the best discount they can give out for you right now. All right. And it comes out to just about $1 a night for a great night's sleep. You can't beat it. Shopbeam.com/Steve. Use the code Steve. Again, grab it for up to 40% off. Try it today at shopbeam.com/Steve, code Steve. Well, some of you that are Blaze veterans, you'll recall that Jordan Schachtel was once a part of our company here and was originally one of our national security analysts. He's now gone out on his own, but we bring him back every now and then as an old friend, and we thought today might be a good day to do that because we're now in his wheelhouse of expertise with everything that's transpired here over the last 96 hours or so with Operation Epic Fury. And good to see you again, Jordan. How are you?
Doing well, Steve. How's it going?
Better than I deserve. Before I ask any questions where I might lead you in a way with my own narratives and biases, let me just ask an open-ended question. Your thoughts on what's transpired so far with Operation Epic Fury and why?
So I think that, regardless of what people's positions were before this military operation, I think that, the first few days have been, as far as I can tell, through the fog of war, have been very beneficial to U.S. and, Israeli and Gulf Arab interests. We're accomplishing the mission. We're destroying Iran's, capabilities to hit us, to build, further nuclear facilities. And, despite Iran being able to hit a couple military bases and the tragic loss of some American soldiers, the casualties have been extremely lopsided. And, we are hitting Iran with precision. There really hasn't been any major, civilian incidents other than the contested one with the school next to the military base. I'm not sure what's happening there, but I think the objectives are being completed. And now we're kind of at this stage where we are waiting to see, if the president of the United States is going to, call the Iranian people out into the streets. I think he's told them to wait thus far while we, achieve our military objectives. But I think that's the next thing to look for is, what will the Iranian people do?
Well, that brings us then to the narrative portion of this conversation. And something that I think I'll count myself among them. A lot of us learned in Trump's first term, as we saw him have unprecedented foreign policy success in this region, sidestepping things like the Palestinian question that had kind of bogged down peace efforts in this region for decades, the entirety of the post-Reagan era, the Bush, whether it was Republican under Bush or Democrat under Obama or Clinton, the obsession with the Palestinian question, and yet Trump just kind of sidestepped all of that and forged unique alliances here. And I think that provoked, people like me to kind of do more research. How was he able to do that? And I think one of the things that Trump understood, given the amount of intimate, high-level business deals he's done in this region for decades, is that Arab and Muslim are not necessarily the same thing all the time, and that certainly Arab and Iranian are not the same thing, like almost ever. And I think that what you've seen play out is that very distinction here. And I wonder, Aaron and I were just talking during the break. A mistake that was maybe made here by the Iranians in response. Listen, they're self-aware. They're more aware of what the Arab nations think of them truly than even people like we are, okay? But to preemptively now hit all these Arab countries, as opposed to maybe making this entirely about the great and little Satan and forcing some of the internal elements within these Arab countries that do still exist, that are friendlier to the ideology of an Iran, for example, than a United Arab Emirates, then force them to kind of have to make a decision with their own domestic policy or political pressures within their own Islamic factions. The Iranians just seem, Jordan, like they just bypassed that entire realpolitik and gave all of these Arab countries that we all know now don't like them and hate them and want them gone almost as badly as the Israelis do. They gave them all kind of political cover with their own people to go ahead and kind of at least, begrudgingly sign off on it, if not outright join it. Am I reading this right?
I think you're right. What's interesting is what happened in the hours after U.S. and Israeli forces assassinated and bombed the compound of the supreme leader. It seems like they had some kind of doomsday option. They call it their decentralized approach, aka we killed so many of their commanders that they can't get into they can't figure out what's going on with communications. But now by default, it seems that these IRGC, Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, their commanders are making at least what the Iran's foreign minister is advertising. Who knows if it's real? But they seem to be making decisions without any kind of chain of command. In part because we're jamming their comms, but in part because it might be some kind of clerical decision that was made before the war. And it kind of goes to show that this is exactly why Iran couldn't be allowed to develop, advanced nuclear capacity or try to, God forbid, smuggle a nuke, through Russia, China, or Pakistan. Because if this is if they're sending kamikaze drones into, luxury hotels and just trying to kill random civilians in Dubai who are also Muslims, I don't think that goes to show that they can be a responsible handler of a nuclear weapon, to say the least. So it seems to affirm, the U.S. and Israel's decision to, attack before, they could acquire extremely advanced capabilities.
That's exactly what Aaron said before you came on, that even if you think this entire the justification of this is a Zionist narrative, the actions of the Iranians in response to it are actually affirming said Zionist narrative, as you just also pointed out as well. So that gets to the other narrative, though, and I think this one is maybe less clear, is what comes next. And this is something that a lot of people on our side are concerned about. You mentioned the Revolutionary Guard. We have two different, standing armies on the ground there. The Iranian army, the Revolutionary Guard. The Iranian army is way bigger. But the Revolutionary Guard is way more zealous. There's even I guess it starts with a Q. I can't remember the name. Kind of like their version of a Navy SEAL within that unit. And a lot of those are, my understanding is, foreign Shia operatives from all over the world. Okay, that kind of serve in this unit. And it was kind of as an homage to Iran for their support of their terror networks. You'll notice that the White House is being very clear. They want to degrade the air and naval capacities of Iran. They're not saying anything about the fact there's about 500,000 armed soldiers on the ground in Iran right now within these two armies combined, right? And you have to think, if you're going to topple a regime, the people that own all the guns, Jordan, get a say in what comes next to some degree, right? So that, to me, is the concern that I have, and still a lot of people on our side have about this. What say you on this?
Yeah, I agree with that. So on the top level, you have the clerics, the Shia fanatics, but you're right. They're not the ones who are really wields operational authority in Iran. You have the IRGC, this subcategory, maybe 10% of the military, maybe 100,000 personnel, and they're the Quds Force, they're special forces, and you have the Basij and domestically, and they're the biggest problem in Iran. If we don't figure, there's no way we can just send protesters into the streets or encourage them to go into the streets while the IRGC still has full control of the country, because as we saw, in past weeks and months, that they'll just slaughter these protesters to retain their grip and power. The original Ayatollah Khomeini installed the IRGC to protect, the revolution, the coup that, overthrew the Shah and installed this Islamic regime. So these people are pretty hardcore. However, as you mentioned, you have the regular military of Iran, which is another, 500, 600,000 people. And I don't think that they're so ideologically invested. A lot of people are just in the military there for a job. So I think the appeal has to be to the regular military to turn against the hardcore revolutionaries that are the IRGC. So the key is to suppress this 100,000 Islamic militia, and that's the key to the future of Iran itself.
Do we know within the Iranian National Army, again, not to be confused with the Revolutionary Guard, within the Iranian National Army, and tell me if you think that this analysis from me going into this is fair or not, that I was noting before we began these hostilities, that there wasn't even a problematic, drunk half the time, but singular resistance leader like a Boris Yeltsin in the latter days of the Soviet Union, let alone a full-blown statesman who had the respect of the nation and could win the first democratic election like a Lech Walesa in Poland, right? Like, who's the on-the-ground face of that could rally, the dissident portion of this population, which is sizable, against the regime should we, mortally wound it? Is there even an El-Sisi figure within the Iranian National Army that still may not be a good guy, but he's kind of our guy, so it's okay, kind of a thing, Are those fair questions for me to ask? Do we have answers to those questions at all?
Yeah, so we don't have great answers to those questions because of the antagonistic relationship between the U.S. and Iran for the past almost 50 years now. So there's opposition leaders abroad, of course, the Shah, Pahlavi being the most prominent one. You have other opposition groups. They're all based abroad. They all live in exile because if they came into Iran under the Ayatollah, they'd probably be imprisoned and hung from the highest crane. So we don't. I know that there were reports in the corporate media that said that they, it was kind of a funny thing that Trump said that we were looking at people that we could potentially install that were part of the military, and we ended up killing them all in that meeting with the Ayatollah. But it's unclear right now. I'm sure, at some level of U.S. and Israeli intelligence, they probably do have people that are clandestinely on our side that will probably seek to, help us foment the counter revolution against the Islamic Republic. But it's unclear right now whether that leadership will come externally through the Shah's descendants or internally. So we're just gonna have to see how that plays out.
One more thing on this, and final question for me is a little birdie of mine recently had a private conversation with I'll call this person a high-ranking official within one of these Arab states that is no fan of Iran, and this person said, "Listen, we all want this regime gone. We're all scared to death of what will come after the fact. And we don't really know answers to that. And that's the calculation here that that everybody's concerned about." What's your reaction to that?
It's hard to get worse than a regime that is so much American blood on their hands. Mm-hmm. But I think that, you're right. It is dangerous to play. It's always dangerous to play regime change games. And I think that the most consequential outcome of this would be to just completely obliterate any advanced weapons capacity that the regime has and to go from there. When we play regime change games, you're right, it tends to backfire. But this is akin to killing Baghdadi and being concerned about his successor or bin Laden or his successor. Mm-hmm. Like, these guys are the worst of the worst. And I think from the Arab perspective is that they don't want regional turmoil. Yep. If you're the Qataris, if you're the Saudis, when you have an energy-based economy, yep, you don't want shipping lanes to be shut down. So they're obviously going to be nervous about stuff like that. But I think when it comes to Iran, mitigating the threat is priority 1A, and then everything else is secondary.
All right, I lied. I have time for one more question. I got about a minute here. China was the top purchaser of oil reserves, crude reserves from both Venezuela and Iran. How much of this for the Trump administration is also about sending a message to them?
I think a lot of it is about China. I mean, especially with their relationship with Iran, they were basically the only buyer of Iranian energy, and it was like 15% of what China's imports were. But if you look at the numbers further, the price point is so low that it accounts for a significant amount of the Chinese economic importing energy. So it's very significant for them to lose a trading partner. And thankfully, they already said, basically, good luck, Iran. We're going to give you all the moral support in the world, but if we're not getting militarily involved. So it kind of goes to show that they're not a good ally, neither are the Russians. But it's definitely significant for Taiwan. It makes them think twice about it if they were to pursue, an invasion of the island, what the energy situation looks like without a partner in Iran.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with Venezuela. Regardless of whether it was, a primary objective, it's been good for America and very harmful to Iran on the energy front and China on the energy front.
Great stuff, Jordan. Thank you for joining us, brother. Made us smarter. Appreciate it. You bet.
Thanks.
Let me try to make it even simpler for laymen, what Jordan was just saying about the price point. Imagine you did your grocery shopping at Walmart, which is what me and Amy do, all right? And your grocery bill is a few $100 a week compared to or a month compared to all of your other bills, your car payments, your mortgages, your insurance, and all that kind of stuff, right? Okay. So it's maybe 10, 15% of your overall budget. But then suddenly, because you have to have groceries, Walmart goes out of business, right? And you're going there because they're like the cheapest. And now you got to go to a place, go to Whole Foods instead. That's the only other grocery store in town.
This is what I was saying.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so, because you have to have the groceries, it wasn't that much of your bill, but you have to have the groceries, and now you're paying a lot more for them, which impacts your budget and nut on everything else that you were counting on too. That's kind of what he was explaining there.
So 20-ish% of your imported oil, which China does not produce much of its oil itself. They can't scale very quickly.
The cheapest 20%.
Yeah, the cheapest 20%. You're talking about 20% of your entire imported oil that you're getting at a severe discount.
Mm-hmm.
That's pretty significant. That's bordering on cataclysmic. And if you're watching the last 2 months, if you're over there in Beijing, it's not President Xi Jinping, it's President Cheating Bricks, spelled BRICS. Because I think what you've seen is that a lot of your designs, and didn't they just purge much of their senior military leadership?
They had a coup attempt. Yeah, they had a coup attempt just a few weeks ago. Yeah.
Whether it's economic forces or otherwise, I think we're getting closer to what the reality of the world has been for most of human history. That's one thing that's hardest to break. The bubble we've lived in since you and I, Steve, were like 7 years old in 1979, and what Jimmy Carter did vis-a-vis Iran and why it exists in the first place the way it is, we need to pop that bubble.
Well, let's do that. I'm going to give you some of my own analysis of what's happening and why. We're going to do that when we return. Stay tuned. All right, back here with Hour 2, live and on demand on Blaze TV, radio, and podcast, alongside Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre. I am Steve Deace. You can let us know what you think about what we think via the stevedeace.com inbox by emailing the show, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook, MeWe, and Gab. You can follow me at Steve Deace Show on X, Instagram, and TikTok. Don't forget you can also subscribe to our YouTube channel at Deace Show on YouTube, where the clock is ticking. Is it April 16th? I think that's the date, right? The deadline for YouTube to respond to why they're censoring us to the 16 state attorneys general that sent that letter. I think it's April 16th, right?
Okay.
I think it is. It's somewhere in there. Somewhere in like mid-April, I think is what that deadline is. At Deace Show on YouTube. And then finally, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast. If you are a podcast listener, and you guys are the biggest part of our audience, so make sure to hit that subscribe button, or if you're on Apple iTunes, follow. And therefore, you're going to know that everything that we do, every time we do it, it's right there in your podcast feed. And you guys, if you love what we do, can leave us a 5-star review. Tens of thousands of you have done that for us. Thank you for each and every one of those. And we would appreciate it if you'd add one today. Just like we appreciate in the Deace household our friends at Trust and Will, because we use them for our own estate planning purposes. And we put them to the test before we recommended them to you. And we came away absolutely, Amy and I did, absolutely raving about the easy-to-use website, simple to navigate, All your information and documents are securely stored with bank-level encryption. And now they've added this new feature, by the way, since Amy and I signed up a couple of years ago. It's called Shared Document Access, so that you can easily share your estate planning documents with trusted friends and family so they know going in what their role in your future is going to be. So each will also very customizable, state-specific, legally valid. Can't beat it. Again, we use it ourselves. So add some peace of mind to your future for that ultimate destiny that's coming for all of us, man. Father Time remains undefeated. All right, go to trustandwill.com/Deace for 20% off. That's and, the word and, trustandwill.com/Deace for 20% off. That's trustandwill.com/Deace for 20% off. All right, so I wanted to make sure after a long weekend, and you guys have already been inundated with a lot of news and a lot of commentary, and I wanted our opening hour to be a palate cleanser. And as much as we possibly could, kind of help to sift through the various discussions and debates that are occurring, many of them on our own side right now, so that we can see where these debates are coming from and are they legit or are they not. For example, Jordan is a Zionist. He could not have given, I think, under the circumstances, more sober analysis than what we just heard in that last segment. If there was ever a time, if there was ever a time for one of our Jewish friends like Jordan to come on here and dunk the ball a little bit in the end zone, okay, or spike the ball, I should say, a little bit in the end zone. Sorry, I got March Madness on the mind. Spike the ball a little bit in the end zone. If there was ever a moment to justify at least a little bit of that, this would kind of be that moment. Wasn't even a hint of that. And I think you saw Jordan was just very professional and very upright with his analysis. I thought he was outstanding in that last segment. And so as best as we can, all right, we're gonna try to provide as much clarity as we can. And at least try to clarify with the other viewpoints that you guys are getting exposed to all day long, in the 21 hours that we're not here with you. We're going to try to at least have as much time that we spend clarifying these views and getting to a position of truth as best as we can, as much as we are our own views. So the first hour was about providing some of that clarity. This hour is going to be much more now about what I think and what Todd and Aaron thinks of what I think. So let's get to it. It's time for some fake news or not. And I've put out on social media through the first 4 days of this conflict now 4 big picture items that I think are either dictating the events we're seeing or being exposed by the events we're seeing. And so let's go through these one by one, and you guys tell me if you think they're fake news or not and why. Okay? I think this war in particular is a convergence of 3 trends. Number 1, President Trump has been on the record for decades. These clips are very easy to find if you want. He has been on the record for decades with his disdain for the Iranian regime, his desire for it to never have nuclear weapons. I think that he likely never intended to leave office with the current Ayatollah power structure in place. Number 2, much of the Arab world is sick of the Iranian regime and wouldn't mind it being severely muted, if not outright removed. And that Iran, frankly, has more friends in places like Beijing and Moscow these days than it does Amman, Jordan, Cairo, Egypt, Dubai of the UAE, or Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. And when I posted this on February 28th, that was before Iran began just scattering buckshot all over the lands of these Arab countries. This is probably even more true now on March the 3rd than it was on February 28th when I posted this originally. And then number 3, you even see this with the commentary from the Israeli opposition leader to Netanyahu. The Israelis are as determined and united in their resolve against sworn enemies as they have been in decades following the October 7th massacre. So I think these 3 trend lines kind of converged to bring us to Operation Epic Fury. Fake news or not?
Not fake news. Todd, do you want to go first?
Not fake news. 1 and 3 are intimately linked because even with October 7th, if the American presidency was different than it is currently, if Israel's dealing with Joe Biden, I mean, it's just a different story, obviously. Donald Trump, and this goes to what I said last time about circumstances and what reality actually is and how we've been kind of numbed. Donald Trump is a kind of out of time as we've become used to what statesmanship are like. He is, believe it or not, the rich, spoiled rich kid from Manhattan is much more like most like desert chieftains in all of history. It's about power. It's about shame and honor. It's about, okay, well, here's a line. You can do whatever you want on that other side, but if you come on this side and bark, it's the major league. Do whatever you want in your own front yard. You start barking buck naked on the moon in mine, it's a different story. We have to acclimate ourselves to the fact that, like Donald Trump or don't like Donald Trump, but he's actually more representative of Efron and find out throughout all human history than the lies we've been telling ourselves in modern America.
So from a meta standpoint, this is absolutely not fake news. You could add 3 or 4 subpoints here.
Like the China one, for example.
It's like the China one on point number 2 there. It's almost the timing here is almost like fullness of time level of good timeliness, because Russia, even if they were a good ally,
they're spread
thin right now.
Yep.
China, even if they were a good ally, almost at this point, don't you think they have more of a motivation to ensure that Iran actually hands power over to somebody who makes the ships run on time than they do actually backing Iran against,
not just scattering buckshot all over the Arab world.
Because what's better? You know what's better than no oil at all? Losing access to 20% of your oil, actually paying market price.
Yeah.
So maybe they won't be able to pay black market prices for oil anymore, but I'd rather pay market price for oil than have no oil whatsoever or send my country into an economic shock.
Yes.
So there's just, the timing here is crazy. The more that you look at this from multiple angles, especially Iran, they are completely isolated at the moment.
And this
is just from our vantage point. Maybe if you ask somebody deep in the State Department, they'd have a different perspective. But from our vantage point, based on the intel that we're able to see open facing, they're pretty isolated.
Can I add just one thing to his timing, then I'll go back to you? You want to talk about timing, by the way? The Jewish festival of Purim just began. Okay. Now, what is Purim? Purim is the book of Esther, right? The only book of the Bible where God is actually not referred to by name, but Esther is who goes to the Persian king. The Jews are now still in captivity, but under the Persians who have conquered the Babylonians. They're about to send them back to the Holy Land, by the way, in the time of Nehemiah and Zerubbabel and Ezra. But there's Haman is kind of the governor for the king, and he is orchestrating a genocide. And so you've probably heard one of the most quoted Bible verses in the Old Testament, for such a time as this, that's right out of the book of Esther. And Esther's uncle Mordecai challenges her, hey, maybe God orchestrated you to become the king's bride for such a time as this, so that you would go and be the instrument by which God would use to save his people Israel. And then he says something very interesting to her. He goes, if you don't do what God has called you to do, salvation will come to the Jews by another name, meaning that the entire sovereign will of God is not relying on this one Jewish girl named Esther. I mean, no, but it's for you, niece, I fear for, and what it will mean for you if you do not do. And why was this such a big deal? Some of you may say, well, what's a big deal about a wife going to her husband to lobby for something? Well, the reason that Esther is now the king's wife is because the other wife decided to go and lobby for something, but at the time that Persian custom did not allow for her to interrupt and speak to the king, so she was executed, and that created an opening, okay? And so there's not really an opening. It's not on the king's docket. Argue for the Jews today was not on the king's docket. Okay, so she's also now going to have to put her own life in risk, in danger, to lobby for her people. And it ends up that the king, because of his affection for her, and he's not aware to the depths that Haman is willing to go for this genocide, once he finds out about it and verifies that he has Haman hung from the very gallows that he was constructing for the Jews. That festival is occurring now. And of course, Persia is the original name for what modern country? Iran. Now, if that fullness of time doesn't make the hair on the back of your neck stand up enough, let me throw this one at you. We launched Operation Epic Fury, according to the Muslim calendar, on the 11th day of the 9th month. Literally, 9/11 on the Muslim calendar is when we launched Operation Epic Fury. Those are some insane coincidences when you stop and think about it. So, just to your point, Aaron, about the fullness of time. Todd, back to you.
Well, they're perfect examples that relate to one another. The economics Aaron mentioned, or Steve, the theology. But when when you push it up to the line, when you take theoretical theology, theoretical physics, and push it up to incarnate, lived experience, that's when you find out it's time to ask yourself, Dr. Jones, what do you really believe? And again, that's something in modern history a lot of the eggheads have gotten out of the practice doing. You have to find out what people really believe. And even as strident as it is in terms of lording it over their people in Iran, we may have finally just found out that, no, this game has gone on, what, Steve, our entire adult lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
How about we just say enough?
Well, that's such a key point that you just made. What do people actually believe? And the reason why you have to find that out, and it's not on a white paper or in a think tank, because people really believe what they're willing to do.
Yes.
That's what they really believe. You can claim to believe all kinds of things, right? All right. The Palestinian question. Cool. I mean, what do you guys, well, I just dropped a Moab on Syria, so I could do that, or we could all be richer. Thoughts? I don't know what a Palestinian is, and deal. You see what I'm saying? I mean, what you believe, what you really believe is what you're really willing to do. That's and that can't be found on a white paper or in a think tank. That's not to say there's no place for any of those things. And I've written white papers for think tanks. There's a value to try to get out ahead of situations and analyze them so that you're not constantly stepping on rakes or getting blindsided all of the time. But ultimately, there's no replacement for practical experience, is what you're saying.
Yes, and so after October 7th and what Aaron said, their reaction is bombing other Muslims in the region. Why are we being patient with you? You keep showing us who you are.
Right. And it makes it easier for Jordan to come on here as a Zionist and give very sober analysis because the Iranians have acted so insane, he doesn't need to add any rhetorical flourish or any of his own narrative that is spin to that at all. The facts themselves that they just scattered, munition buckshot all over the entire Middle East in response to this that just proves all of their various talking points about who the Iranian regime is. Right? If I was Netanyahu, I wouldn't even do any more press avails. I'd just be having my own, government just putting out, bomb reports from Qatar and Saudi Arabia and Jordan. You see, that's all I'd be doing, right? And Bahrain. Who bombs Bahrain? Iran does, apparently. All right. Next. Last June, President Trump proved as commander-in-chief that he could execute devastatingly precise military action in Iran without getting bogged down in regime change. Now it seems that he hopes to prove he can do regime change in Iran without getting bogged down in a quagmire. For the American people to rally in support of this requires learning the following lessons from the Bush-Obama era of mistakes. Number one, the Iranian people have to initiate the regime change on the ground instead of American boots on the ground, which President Trump has already called for. Number two, this requires input, support, and legitimacy from the same Arab/Muslim nations supporting action against Iran now. We cannot unilaterally impose or secure a government there, nor can the Israelis for obvious reasons. This needs to be seen on both sides of the globe as a regional solution, not some progressive utopian scheme of bringing democracy to the Middle East, and maybe I should add, or some Zionist puppet, okay, that they can then rally a whole new generation of clerics against in these countries, all right? Especially because as of now, we have no obvious leader of any resistance on the ground there, like a Yeltsin or a Lech Walesa during the Cold War in its latter days. Number three, we need to make sure we have our homeland secure against terror cells. Casualties here at home from sleeper terror cells will do more to erode support for this than anything else. Let me itemize why. What is the issue, the driving issue of Trump's political ascendancy? What is it? Immigration. And if we are unable to defend our own borders here at home while trying to secure the borders of Iran and Israel, that is an absolute kryptonite to the president's coalition. Number four, we are not importing a wave of, quote, Iranian refugees like we already imported around 4 million Muslims since 9/11. We frankly should have had a flat-out immigration moratorium by now as it is. For example, all the Venezuelan immigrants that celebrated in the streets after we took out Maduro. Well, then go home. You're safe, right? You know what? We did you a solid. We did you a solid. Got rid of your guy, right? Go back on home. Cool. We made Venezuela great again, or at least gave you a nice big down payment on that. Go home. We shouldn't have to take a flood of Iranian refugees if we got rid of the bad guys, right? If anything, we should be saying to the Iranian people here, don't you want to go back home? Make Iran great again. Finally, the world is much different than it was 23 years ago when the ill-fated invasion of Iraq began. We also have different leadership than we did back then, and thanks to Trump's foreign policy shrewdness, we have more Arab allies and friendlies than we did back then too. So the circumstances are not congruent at all for those immediately hitting the panic button. Nevertheless, the mistakes we made back then are still lessons we need to prove that we have learned from. Fake news or not.
I think this, in isolation, none of these 4 points is fake news. The more points that get combined, I will say that it's fake news to this extent. We are going to have to be nimble. If this is real evil that was planning to aggressively manifest that outside of its borders, which it's proven it can and will do in the past, but even more vociferously than it has in the past, and not just be lording its infamy over its own people. Getting rid of that evil may leave. If you don't have to want to have utopia to know that you might just have to settle for something inconvenient for a while. That's just realpolitik. So I think the longer that list gets, the more like this, and this is just common sense. The longer that list gets, the more likely it is to not work out. So that each point has merit in and of itself. But every manifesto gets weaker by definition the more links in every chain there is.
So what I'm hearing you say, Steve, is the same thing that I'm hearing a lot from President Trump, which is essentially this. It's amazing what you can do when the only dogma in your foreign policy is the protection of American interests.
Mm-hmm.
The dogma that we had 20 years ago is that we must bring democracy to nations that
Sacred
do
democracy.
not want democracy.
Yes.
Here's what this is reflected in a lot of President Trump's comments, and it's clear that there is a desire, maybe even more so from the Israelis, but there's a desire from the administration for Iranians to rise up and put in place something better. There's a desire, but that's not part of the mission. A desire is not part of the mission. The mission is to degrade Iran's ability to project their military power outside of its borders. That's the mission here, which means also we have a lot of flexibility. We wouldn't have a whole lot of flexibility if we were doing boots on ground regime change, sacred democracy to the Middle East. We would be going forward very, very slowly towards an end that we don't really know is possible.
Mm-hmm.
We would not have as much flexibility as it stands today. We could leave today. We could. Or since we have air superiority, we can just continue to pick off targets one after the other. And after 3 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks goes by. Maybe a Delcy Rodriguez calls you up, except in this area of the world, and maybe it'd be a Delcy Muhammad from the IRGC. Hey, I'm a commander with the IRGC. Let's make a deal. Wouldn't be a great regime change, but better than making no deal whatsoever. And maybe you can play ball. You can find somebody to play ball with you, even if it's a terrible person. Maybe. Or maybe that doesn't happen, and we just leave in 3 weeks and say, see you in 10 years. See you in 5 years. Don't cross us again, and we'll play this game over again. To me, that sounds like maximum flexibility. I don't know about you.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing what you can do when the only thing that you're really worried about is American interests and not regime change for the sake of bringing sacred democracy to a country, to an area of the world that does not want it and never has.
Did I send you guys the tweet from the guy who said, I got to be honest, guys, I'm rethinking my position on forever wars. If it just means we can just go into places and just kill our enemies and get the hell out whenever we're done. That's kind of like, did I send that to you? Yeah. I mean, that's It's funny. I got several texts of people very concerned about Quagmire from the very beginning, including people you would know. And then some of those same people have texted me in the last 24 hours saying, if it turns out maybe Forever War was a choice, it turns out maybe Quagmire was a choice, right? That we can go in there and send a message, don't mess with us. And we're happy to just keep sending that message to you until you get it. We don't have to do anything more than that. So, all right, one of the points I raised here I think is so important, I'm going to make it again. Watch these comments from Secretary of War Pete Hegseth.
Of course, we're paying attention to any potentialities there. This is a former regime, that seeks to export that ideology and try to sow terror. We're ready for that. We've seen these types of folks before, and the American people can rest assured that we're vigilant on that.
First of all, Hegseth's presence and messaging this entire last 4 days has just been incredible. Okay, incredible. But what he just said has to be true, that we are prepared for Iranian sleeper cells and terrorist sleeper cells, because I'm just telling you, nothing will erode support and divide our base more than our inability to secure our own homeland under the ultimate immigration hawk president, and people are dying because we decided to launch a war, Operation Epic Fury, against Iran, a half a planet away. Okay, you know what I'm saying? It's the old Reagan thing about recession and depression. A recession is when your neighbor doesn't have a job, and a depression is when you don't have one. All right, Operation Epic Fury is when it's happening over there. Okay, war is when it's happening to you right here. Know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And nothing will erode support for this more than that. That has to be true. Has to be true. Has to be.
Well, this is the point I was making about how, the longer the chain gets. You have to understand that on the one hand, it looks like our intelligence is pretty damn good over there. I mean, what we know, where these guys are meeting, it also gives me greater faith than I had 48 hours ago about there might be people there on the ground ready to go in when the time is right. But right now they are on the inside feeding us information. That's a good thing. So let's say it's the best case scenario that is humanly possible with that. Like the Iron Dome, though, Steve, pretty darn good track record, right? Mm-hmm. But also, you've shared with people, there is a missile that got through in both Jerusalem and Tel Aviv. And as you pointed out, they were near the hotels that we would have been staying at, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
literally, one of the hotels we were staying at is in the background of one of the pictures of one of these missiles. Yeah.
So there's been, and we've lost 6 service members. There has been collateral damage.
Yep.
Right? But how close you are to that collateral damage, how personally you feel it, will, can take an otherwise best case scenario that's true when you weigh and measure all the evidence, and then you get inside the media bubble or your preferred narrative and how you feel that. See, that's the trick of all this. How many links are in the chain? Who controls the chain? Who's fixing the chain? Who's talking about the chain the most? Who's too busy to be bothered about the chain unless it hits in their own backyard and then suddenly they know everything? See, this is the point. What he can be saying can be true, absolutely. But if one gets through, just one, even though there's been a lot of success, then we're going to have to find what we actually believe.
Aaron?
Well, one did get through.
Yeah.
I should have put
Property
this
of Allah.
Yeah, I should have put this in the montage in Austin, Texas on 6th Street.
Yeah. See?
Guy said with a T-shirt that said Property of Allah, undershirt with the Iranian flag. Now, it seems like, just from the vantage point we're looking at, not necessarily a sleeper cell, but more of a lone wolf, radicalized. You start looking into what mosque was he going to, things like that. I mean, you've seen reactions from American Muslims all over the country.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't exactly inspire confidence.
The clips coming out of Dearborn, Michigan right now are
this is what
there are worse clips coming out of Dearborn, Michigan about this right now than there are Mecca or Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Stop and think about that for a second. And I would argue, Aaron, the fact that he just appears to have been randomly radicalized is worse.
Yeah.
How systemic does this influence have to be for people to get radically randomly radicalized, right?
Yeah. And
Austin, Texas is a hell of a long way. It's half a continent away from Dearborn, Michigan.
You see how many mosques are in Texas? See if
it's like over 300, I thought.
Yeah. So if that happens and our reaction is, oh, it's unfair, we went over into our no, maybe the problem is what we allowed to happen in Texas.
Yeah, I think random radicalization is worse because that indicates now that it's into the water table. That it's not confined to. Yeah, we let some crazies in and we put them all in Dearborn so we can keep an eye on all of them, and we know where to go every time something happens or we hear chatter. I mean, if you can just get randomly radicalized in Texas, 2,500 miles from Detroit, from the suburb of Detroit, then that's a systemic problem.
Mm-hmm.
That's not just located, to you let a little, too much immigration happen in one particular community. All right, the last one I'm going to save for when we come back so that we have ample time to discuss it. All right, and I'm not even going to tease what it is so that nobody gets a head start on how to react to it. But I again have to stress we can't keep our coalition together. And it won't be because of whatever you think Tucker's become or what you think has happened with Megyn Kelly, okay? Or some of the same names that go right. And by the way, Tucker and Megyn Kelly are serious people. Candace Owens is not. I just don't think she's the same. I wouldn't put her in that. I'd put her in the Nick Fuentes group. She's not even, she couldn't hold the intellectual jock straps of either of those people. But see, this is why I get concerned. I mean, with what Tucker is doing, because I know how smart he is. And just recently, in the last 2 weeks, Tucker was wrong about Israel's president visiting Epstein Island, was wrong about that. He talked about getting detained in Israel. We saw the video. It was essentially the same kind of security checkpoint we probably would have had to go through ourselves if we were going to go there, right? And he was wrong about Mossad planning bombs in Qatar, according to the Qatari government. And see, that's the kind of stuff. There's all kinds of ways to raise the concerns that Tucker has without being dishonest like this. These are serious concerns people have. It's okay to have these concerns and to be discussed seriously. We don't have to gaslight people in the process. And that's where Tucker gets compared to the Candace Owens of the world, because we all know he's smarter than this. So this just looks like a griftathon when you're just putting stuff out there that is just easily disproven to get a reaction, right? All right, when we come back, one more angle to this. Is it fake news or not? Next.
The Steve Deace Show.
All right, back here on the Steve Deace Show, and we are powered by our friends over at Chirp. Preventative health is vital, particularly in this day and age when you can't always trust the conventional healthcare system, which is more like a sick care system, and especially as we get older and we want to get and stay active, right? And that's where Chirp comes in, like the Chirp Contour. I've used that. It's the decompression massage table that essentially gives you a clinical treatment right there at home. And then there's the stuff I take with me, man, the trigger points, the Chirp Contour rolling power mini massager. Those things are in my suitcase when I go out on speaking tours and stuff around the country, or just out with the wife on a little getaway. All right, those things are huge in avoiding injuries that maybe put you back as you try to get active and stay healthy and have not just quantity of life, but quality of life, especially as we get older. Or maybe you're young, but you let yourself kind of go a little bit and you want to get back into shape. These things, there's a reason why when you go to the gym, the people in better shape than you are doing these things. Okay. So as a general rule of thumb, the people in better shape than you probably know some things maybe that would be good for you to know and for you to emulate. All right. And all those things, they've got a lot of them at Chirp right now. All right. So go to GoChirp, literally gochirp.com/Deace right now. CHIRP. All right. GoChirp.com/Deace right now. GoChirp.com. /Steve. GoChirp.com/Steve. Again, GoChirp.com/Steve. All right. I don't think we're going to get to it with the depth that I wanted to. So can I just do a very abbreviated Pop Culture Tuesday before we finish out the fake news or not on the Operation Epic Fury?
All right. Good call.
Netflix, the new Netflix documentary on the 1980 U.S. Olympic team is phenomenal.
It's great.
It is. You've seen it too?
Yeah.
It's phenomenal. They did it right. And I have to tell you, when I first thought Netflix and the Olympic, no. Mike Ruzzione's like trans now, okay? Right. That's what I thought was going to happen, okay? Half the team comes out, okay?
There's very few things. I'm sure it came up to the table. Can we trans this thing? And there's very few things we can't.
No, this one they realized they had to let it go.
Ice? No, got to walk away.
And they did it, man. They did a phenomenal job. It's Netflix production value, but the story in and of itself. And they got as many of the guys together that are still alive as they could. I mean, they have Herb Brooks's kids, okay, providing, kind of because their dad died about 20 years ago. I mean, one of the great nights I ever had in sportscasting is he came to Des Moines when I was covering the minor league hockey team here for the Register. And he came here, I think, to scout for the Pittsburgh Penguins, and the Buccaneers had, our minor league team had several guys that would go on and play in the NHL. Scott Clemenson, who played goalie in the NHL from right here in Des Moines. Eric Cole, who was one of the best players for the Carolina Panthers in the NHL for several years. And so he came here to scout those guys. And hardly anybody knew who he was. I did. And so him and I just sat up there in the back corner of the ice arena in Urbandale for 3 hours watching the Bucks. And I tried not to go the full Chris Farley because I was whining about Chris Farley back then too. All right. I tried not to go, remember when you won the gold medal? That was great, but as many times as I could without literally having him roll his eyes at me, I tried to pester him and everything as much as I could. It's one of those moments, man, where it was pre-cell phones or at least smartphones. Otherwise, I'd had a picture for sure. But they did it. I mean, Al Michaels is in this, and he's reminiscing. They did it a phenomenal job. They did it justice. So if you have Netflix and you want to watch that, is it safe, Dustin Hoffman? This one is safe. This one is safe to watch. They did it. They did it right. They did. Give them credit.
Totally agree.
All right. Let's get to the final point then on fake news or not. Okay. And this is in response to some comments from Pope Leo the 14th. And this is where the Pope essentially gives out, I don't even know how to describe this. I mean, some kind of social justice message. I'm following with deep concern what is happening in the Middle East and in Iran during this tumultuous time. Stability and peace are not achieved through mutual threats, nor through the use of weapons which sow destruction, suffering, and death, but only through reasonable blah, 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 blah. And this is my reaction to his analysis. I think it's pretty obvious at this point that this American Pope was specifically selected to try and check American nationalism, influence, and hegemony. I just don't think it's possibly a coincidence that there's not been an American Pope in the 250-year existence of this country, or even an American who became close to becoming Pope. And we just so happened to get one right at the time that America is having a serious surge in caring for the homeland again, securing its borders again, putting its own national interest ahead of the New World Order, to use a George H.W. Bush term, or the Council on Foreign Relations, which kind of ended up supplanting much of the United Nations, or globalism, term du jour, whatever you want. And in fact, during the break, I asked Grok how many times since he became Pope has Pope Leo XIV posted anything at all about evils perpetrated by the Iranian regime. What do you think the number is? 0. None. Absolutely none. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think either he was specifically picked for this, or this is his mission, is he views himself in a way that Pope John Paul II viewed himself because of where he came from. He was in Poland at the rise of the Iron Curtain, and specifically wanted, as part of his overall papal mission, to be a check against the Soviet Union and Marxism. I think this guy sees himself the same thing with American nationalism. I just don't think it's a coincidence at all. Fake news or not.
That's not fake news as analysis. I think it's very fair-minded. Listen, just as with what Steve led the show with, talking about dispensationalism and Reformed. And as you know, my call for a Protestant Council of Nicaea, the amount of chaos sown in communicating by American conservative Protestantism, because in the name of sola scriptura, they are on opposite sides and going at each other's throats on a daily basis. That communication problem isn't helping. This is the Catholic version of it. And this is yet just another version. Take aside the specificity that Steve mentioned, which again I think is fair. This is the broad principle that I've said. This generation of Catholic leadership just needs to die, per my deacon, who's a member of that leadership. And it's because they on way too many issues, they confuse the gospel with John Lennon's Imagine.
Mm-hmm.
And they did it. They just wrote a letter about birthright citizenship. It's that generation. And until it goes away, this is a biblical principle. This is Moses 40 years in the desert. They're crackheads. They're just addicted to this. And there is a younger generation of priests coming through. They are much more conservative in almost every single way. So, but it doesn't pay you as a Catholic to push back against anything Steve said when you don't have to believe that was the overt intention necessarily. I believe it's still fairly likely that's one of the major variables that considered, but even if it's not, that's the effect that's playing out with this eggheadedness. It's real evil. Steve's not being unfair by pointing out how many times has we tweeted about this. It's your job, as we just got done talking about in Romans 12 and 13, whether it's individual evil or community evil. Fight it, vanquish it, point it out. Don't be ambiguous about that. And he is right now, and it's not helpful.
See, I think he could make, if he makes that exact same statement while making it very clear he opposes the evils of the Iranian regime and what they have done to their own people. That means, by the way, he wasn't out there making statements when they were murdering tens of thousands of their own people during the recent protests either, okay? If he does all of that and then wants to say, listen, war should be a last option. I don't think we exhausted all of our diplomatic things here. You see what I'm trying to say? Mm-hmm. Then a moral, he has asserted his moral authority. This is social justice authority. This is peace without any kind of moral clarity whatsoever, as if we could just automatically within ourselves just beat our swords into plowshares, as you just said, and do John Lennon's Imagine. Well, hell, if we can do John Lennon's Imagine, why do we need a church?
Yeah.
What do we need? We're good, right? By the way, and No Religion Too, I believe, is one of the lyrics of that song, correct? Yeah. So, I mean, we need a church and religion because we can't do those things. We need clarity on what is good and what is evil. And I don't expect him to, reconstitute the Holy Roman Empire, although I think it's probably a pretty good idea. I don't expect him to do that. Fine, cool, great. But to just immediately what's the difference between I'm a Christian suing for peace and I'm just a social justice warrior? Because the language can sound a lot alike depending on its context and framework. And if you can't first say what is good and what is evil, then that's just a peace-nick hippie social justice message. That's not that I'm a Christian suing for peace and I don't want to see innocent lives lost, and I don't think that we've gone through enough diplomatic channels yet to, you guys were negotiating just till a few days ago. Next thing I know, we have epic fury. You see there were ways to do this and still be true to what it means to try to speak and stand for what's good, true, and beautiful. This is just a social justice message. That's all it is.
Yeah, it's when he uses the word dialogue, it's like, oh.
No, that's just right. Yeah, that's
because.
Yeah.
I mean, your Lord, he certainly did go out and talk, but he exorcised demons, and ultimately he exorcised evil once and for all through action. Not mere words, by dying on that cross.
Mm-hmm.
It's just not even remote. It's really,
in other words, the cross is evidence of there's a place where dialogue ends.
This is honestly why this notion is why in the Gospels, when Peter gets a little uppity about can't we just dialogue about this, Satan get behind me.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how more plainly I can put it than that.
It's just virtue signaling of the highest order. That's all it is. And it's I say that it's merely virtue signaling. However, it just so happens to be coming from the Pope. Going to need a little bit better than that from the Pope. Peace is not possible. Let me read this again. Stability and peace are not achieved through mutual threats, nor through the use of weapons, which sow destruction, suffering, and death, but only through reasonable, sincere, and responsible dialogue. It's news to me that peace is, as a blanket statement, never achieved through use of weapons or destruction. Really? Really? That just, it's nonsensical on its face.
It's hippy-dippy BS.
And to put, what he's really doing there is providing moral authority or moral standing to a regime that just yet, like 5 minutes ago, murdered tens of thousands, were being told, of their own citizens.
Mm-hmm.
That's just heinous.
Mm-hmm.
Just heinous. It sounds all good. It goes down nice and easy, but it's just heinous. And like I said, you're going to need a little bit more from the Pope than that. A little bit more.
Or get some final thoughts after we talk about our friends over at Patriot Mobile. They have been giving more from the very beginning. They've been on the vanguard of the red parallel economy, and I don't just talk about them anymore. For the last 6 years, I've been a customer. Our family made the switch after being with T-Mobile for almost 20 years because T-Mobile said during COVID they were going to start editing your texts for misinformation. And that's when I finally said, okay, listen, I don't care how much of a hassle it's going to be to switch over this entire family. I am never giving T-Mobile another dime of my money. Turned out it wasn't a hassle at all, right? Their customer service team is aces, and they are American, so you can understand them. And they also are trying to preserve the same American values that you fight for as well, which is why they reinvest back into the values you hold in common with them. So keep your number, switch your number, keep your phone, upgrade your phone. They'll make it as customizable for you as they possibly can today. And you'll get started with a free month of service when you go to patriotmobile.com/Steve. Make that switch today at patriotmobile.com/Steve. Maybe you're stuck in a bad contract with a communist company. They've got contract buyout programs as well to get you out of there. All right. patriotmobile.com/Steve. Promo code Steve to get started with a free month of service today at patriotmobile.com/Steve. So my goal, gentlemen, coming into today was to try to provide as much patriotic. All right. We are Team America here on this show. But to be as adult and patriotic simultaneously as we possibly could. This has been a smashing success thus far. But there are still upwards of 500,000 Iranian soldiers on the ground that are armed. And at least 100 to 150,000 of those are complete and total zealots. And in many cases, not even from the nation themselves, have no regard or hesitancy whatsoever about defecating where they live to prove a point for their ideology. So we're still in the early portions of this, so we are optimistic. We want our soldiers to be successful. We want our commander-in-chief to be proven correct, but we want to be adult about this too and not oversell it at the same time. So that was my goal when we came in here today, to also provide as much clarity as we could as well as our own analysis. How do you guys think we did?
Well, I think it's really important, and especially when you see Steve, and he jokes about it, but I like me some me when he puts it that way. When you do this job for a living, you want to be right for a lot of reasons, but just for general levels of success. But I think it's the humility that Steve has shown in coming on here is like, and not being jingoistic, like are increasingly online. That's like the goal, just to play King of the Mountain. I think it does a great credit to the name over Steve's shoulder, his name, that he decided not to play King of the Mountain, because that's not what this show is, and it never has been. So despite what the jokes are, once again, this was Come Let Us Reason Together.
Yeah, word on. I would echo what Todd has talked about with when it comes to nimbleness, and I think to the degree that operationally we have some flexibility that I talked about. We should also grant each other and grant ourselves flexibility to analyze this as things come out. We could wake up tomorrow morning and some IRGC commander decides that, hey, look at me, I'm the captain now, let's make a deal.
Yeah.
I'm never going to attack American interests, just let us run the government here. Still maybe a dictatorship, but no longer as much of a threat to American interests. It could be that we're so far ahead of schedule, Trump says, hey, time to wrap things up and go home. We'll leave a strike group here, but the rest of the forces, you can go home. We could wake up tomorrow morning, and there are 3 different sleeper cells that have been activated all around this country.
Correct.
There are a ton of eventualities. We all need to have flexibility when analyzing this as events unfold.
Not a time for narratives, a time for maturity. Okay? We're stick around and do overtime for Blaze TV subscribers. For the rest of you, we'll see you tomorrow. Noon to 2 Eastern, right after Glenn Beck, right here on Blaze TV. Until then, go hard. Romans 8:28.